The sixth round of the Formula One season this year has been cancelled. The Emilia Romagna Grand Prix will not go ahead as the local region battles flooding and dealing with the human cost of this natural disaster. Formula One issued a statement just a few moments before we went live with this video. They said this: the decision has been taken not to proceed with the Grand Prix weekend at Imola. The decision has been taken because it's not possible to safely hold the event for our fans, the teams and our personnel, and it's the right and responsible thing to do given the situation faced by the towns and cities in the region. It would not be right to put further pressure on the local authorities and emergency services at this difficult time. So I'm joined for some instant reaction by Matt Q. I can see you haven't been travelling, you're at home. We have got some colleagues who I think are either on their way to an airport or trying to come home to discuss. Formula One has raced in bad weather before, so for anyone watching, listening to this, thinking, well, they've got wet weather tyres, why can't they go racing? What ultimately led to the cancellation of the Grand Prix this weekend?
Yeah, as you say, Martin, this is not NASCAR or something where we have to have, protracted rain delays overnight or something. We have extreme wet weather tyres. Whether or not they're up to standard is a different debate, as we've seen from recent Grand Prix. But as you said, there's the humanitarian angle to this, which is that at least 2 people have died. Many more in the local Emilia Romagna region are being displaced. Families are having to move to factories and whatever to find basically safe, dry ground. So you cannot have something as gratuitous as racing going around in that region when people are literally losing their worldly possessions, and when it's not a very nice turn of phrase, but the optics of having to have an emergency helicopter for medical evac if someone crashes when people need to be rescued or taken off sites or floodplains or whatever. You cannot divert any resources away from that, because the accountability would be huge if you could link the two together, and just the absolute sour taste it leaves in the mouth of anyone watching, even motorsport fans. If they cut to a wide shot and you see floodwaters or whatever, and not 100% of resources going towards that, when there are now fundraisers being set up, and like I say, there has been an absolute human cost. You can't have anything diverting away from that. So that is where the pressure has come from. We can go into it a bit later in this video, but this is a decision which I think we can all firmly believe, even as cynics and skeptics, that firmly believe that this has been led by the local authorities, and that commercial lucrative F1 would have perhaps been more resistant to the cancellation of the race, or been up for experimenting with running it with reduced capacity or whatever. But when it it's so hard for teams to get there, fans to get there, and you've got a proper sort of crisis going on, the race just becomes immediately unviable.
Yeah, I've seen some comments online today from people saying, well, look, sport came back after COVID. We all needed sport. It brings people together. And we see the sporting teams from Ukraine playing and competing around the world, and that's important for a country that's going through what they're going through. Look, this is different. This isn't about sport returning after a pandemic, or a country at war that uses sport as a way to either buoy the spirits of a country, or to express their strength and playing as a team. This is one of the richest sports in the world, with all of its motorhomes and private jets, and all the drivers living in Monaco waiting to get on their private jets to fly into a country where people, as Matt says, are suffering a very human cost of this and losing all of their possessions, their homes, and even their lives. And that is something which I don't think, from the commentary I've seen so far, this is a very instant reaction video, not everyone's fully grasping, so maybe just take a breath. But Matt, we've been following this over the last couple of days as we've seen it escalate. First of all, Formula One personnel were not allowed in the paddock, or they were asked to leave after they were setting up. You normally go to Grand Prix weekends. Our colleague Alex Kalinokis, I think, is at the airport right now. What precautions leading up to this had F1 taken in response to knowing that there was a weather situation?
Well, the first thing to say is that the messaging we were getting earlier in the week, when obviously we knew it's been reported, in fact, AlphaTauri were communicating, I think, even ahead of the Miami Grand Prix, that the Faenza, their local town, had been sort of really badly affected by it, and it has been going on since the very early stages of May, when there was a particularly bad period. And I think was it 12 or 13 rivers burst their banks in a 24-hour period, and basically, with persistent rain, and it hasn't subsided since. But anyway, F1, the messaging was that there was no concern around this event, and you have to put that down to, I think, three main factors. One, the status of Formula One, it being so high profile, and the resource it has of vast sums of money to ensure events can go ahead. And also, with 2023, they've had 72 and a half years of experience of bad weather, adverse conditions, unusual events, to have the practices in place, whether that's, learning about the debacle that was Spa 2021 and changing the way rules are implemented, and the point scoring system, or the fact that you do have the right infrastructure, the fail safes, the remote broadcasting facility in Biggin Hill to ensure the TV coverage doesn't short circuit, whatever it is. So from that point of view, there was enough in place earlier in the week that F1 was confident, and they were even confident that a little trivial thing from last year, which was the grassy car parks that were a nightmare to get out of at Imola, they were confident they would be improved. But then there was like a live timing feed, whatever, of the river levels, and they were getting to critical stages. A red weather warning was enforced in the whole region. And then obviously social media clips, I'm sure many people have seen emerge, of the TV compound flooding, water breaching the support paddocks. And as it got to Tuesday afternoon, personnel were told to vacate the circuit. So I think you can just draw a distinction between being instructed to hastily evacuate, and they were moved off site as a precaution, is how it was put. And then they were asked not to return at all on Wednesday. So that sort of says about how bad the situation was, that the queues of traffic, how much the local infrastructure and landscape were struggling. And also you have the other factor, which is that's a day and a half of setup time lost, and that then needs to be accommodated somewhere else in a weekend. So that's how it developed. And then it was really this morning, so we're Wednesday morning now, or Wednesday afternoon, sorry. It was Wednesday morning when things started to take change. Got an update from F1 saying, right, we have a big meeting coming up in the next hour, and suddenly that sort of slightly changed the way things were leaning. You think, they're on an agenda as reduced capacity or even going behind closed doors. But then sort of in the hour leading up to Formula One actually communicating, you had the Deputy Prime Minister saying, we can't have a race going ahead. And at that point, when such high profile political powers are calling for it, and I think actually I'm right, I think I'm right in saying that there's a huge amount of government backing actually behind the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix in Imola. So, when there's such a massive stakeholder and it's one of the most sort of high profile figures calling for it not to go ahead, sort of is the writing sort of on the wall at that point. And then the official communication came that no racing this weekend.
And what about the human side of the Formula One community, the people who we don't see, the people who drive the trucks around Europe, the guys and girls that are putting on things like everything from catering to building the garages, and I guess everyone who covers the event as well. I think Alex Kalinokis, our colleague, is literally in the check-in line right now, and I think they frown upon people doing FaceTime calls when you're trying to check in, or at security, and don't having your bag scanned. So I'm not sure he can join us for this one. But what do we know about other media? I think Alex was okay. I think he could get to his accommodation, but I've read reports of some in Formula One turning up and their Airbnbs were either not available or had their booking cancelled because there's more important things in life, and they were working out where to stay. So even if it hadn't been a case of cancelling the race, could Formula One even have staged a race from what we know a day or two ago, from just the disruption of all those things that it takes to put on that 2 hours of entertainment on a Sunday afternoon?
I can't give you an absolute answer on that, Martin, but an educated guess would sort of lean towards yes, it could have gone ahead. So there was a very small handful, as we understand, of Alpine people that had to be relocated because of their hotel. But otherwise, I think the main sort of knock-on effect would have been just the extreme tailbacks getting in and out of the circuits because of flooded roads and whatnot. So I think in that sense it could have gone ahead. What I probably should have mentioned, you talk about people setting up hospitality in garages, that not only did they lose a day and a half, but if they're sat in the hotel waiting for their news if they can go back and circuit. They then don't know what if they're gonna find, whether the hot plates have short circuited or whatever, and then all the knock on effect, the spares, whatever. But I suppose on that, the most definitive thing, I can give you a few case studies. So yeah, there's a lot of people who have got to the airport and put themselves on a train back. Some of our continental colleagues basically turning around the car on a lay-by and heading back. It's our understanding that F1's chartered planes arrived Wednesday morning, so that is, a private flight effectively for team and championship crew. I don't know quite what's going on with them, but obviously they've landed and probably got a couple of buzzes on their mobile phones to be told it's off. So it's really sort of happening last minute for them, and that's because it's F1 aren't to blame for this, but the official or the internal communication yesterday was everyone travelling as planned. It has been a really fast-moving situation. So, yeah, there are probably quite a lot of people confused, upset, angry, feel like they've had their time wasted. But as you stressed, Martyn, bigger picture, that can all be sorted. I'm sure Wizz Air can make a few quid and put on a couple of flights and get people out of there.
Yeah, there is. I saw some comments online about, this is going to be a big insurance claim. And again, I feel that perhaps people sometimes have not been treating this with quite the seriousness that perhaps the media haven't properly covered it, because the Formula One community was travelling to the event. So, we've not been able to get there and bring you that human side of the story. That's been the Italian media doing that. And if you've not been watching the general news media, you might not know about that situation in Italy. So the Formula One fans that follow Formula One and motorsport websites like ours, we haven't had a chance to cover it because we've been on our way there, even though we obviously do have Italian colleagues as part of our wider company. So let me ask you a little bit about the impact of the cancellation of this Grand Prix. I've seen it described as a cancellation, what I've been calling it, and a postponement. Now, postponement suggests, well, maybe it could happen in a couple of weeks' time. Well, it can't, because we're heading into triple headers and things like that. But what do we know, if anything, at this stage in terms of allowing people to use those tickets? I mentioned this in a big insurance claim. That's not the be-all and end-all. But yeah, sure, if you're a fan and you've paid for a flight or a hotel, the ticket, all those kind of things, then you are individually affected as well as a wider Formula One community. Will people get to go and watch that Grand Prix sometime this year? Is it like COVID where things were moving around, or do we think that it might not happen at all this year?
Well, Martyn, you've obviously been sort of watching a lot of Suits or been doing your law conversion course, because the official headline from F1 is update on a Grand Prix, and the official line is it will not proceed. Autosport, I have to say, has gone with cancellation of the race, and that is because we believe it won't be reorganised for later in the year. The calendar is already massively condensed because of, one, the proliferation, and two, the knock-on effects of China, which really was never going to go ahead, but it was put in a provisional calendar, and people like their slots, and F1 takes a lot of organising, so infrastructure's in place and catering companies are booked for that weekend and whatever, so it will be hard. And then you have the sheer logistics that if you get towards the tail end of the season, you don't go Japan, circuit the Americas, whatever order it is, Imola, back to Brazil. So I don't think this will go ahead. But as you said, you've got to be careful with wording. If you think about the last time a race was cancelled was Australia 2020, and that was done a couple of hours before practice on Friday, and totally understand why, global health pandemic. But that pandemic put bums on seats, and ever since then, everyone has tuned into and absolutely consumed Netflix, which is great, and that has brought lucrative broadcast deals, sponsors, commercial partners. And as we've seen with the recent case of Rocket and Williams, when races and contracts aren't fulfilled, they ask for money back, which is fair enough. When that's playing out up and down the paddock, it's why stakeholders don't want races to be cancelled. So there will be, I'm sure, clauses and whatever, so commercial partners get a bit of money back, and that's why there will have been hesitancy and a reluctance to cancel the Grand Prix. But bigger picture. Yeah,
no, from what I remember of the COVID situation, nobody wanted to be, and again, this might be my old memory failing me, but with Australia, because we were there waiting to go, from what I remember of that, nobody wanted to be the one to call it. So that was, again, I know it's an awful thing to talk about, insurance and money, and there's a human cost that we need to focus on. But there is that side of it as well, that it's good that it's happened on a Wednesday rather than getting to a Thursday night or a Friday morning and saying, well, we can't go, we're just waiting for one person who's going to be liable, if you like, for that decision. So I think it's good that it's happened today. But listen, there have been other events, like you say, Australia. But what about Saudi Arabia? I mean, there was a very serious threat to human life of everybody working and being invited to go and watch a sporting event with the missile threat. Can we draw any kind of parallels between, hang on a minute, well, there was a very serious threat there to human life, and we still put on a sporting event and a spectacle, and everybody got their money paid, and now, but not here. And I'm not trying to give one more importance over the other. It's just, I'm just trying to draw a line between and get your personal thoughts on that. Yeah,
well, the Australia situation, actually, I think it was actually McLaren sort of almost put the wheels in motion. Obviously, everything from, the local half marathon I was down to watch got cancelled that weekend and then whatever. But it was actually McLaren pulling out, and then, the cases of COVID in the paddock, and then obviously the weekend got cancelled. Saudi Arabia was a different one. I was on the ground for that one, waiting outside the FIA building till I think it's 4 o'clock in the morning when drivers emerged, and that went ahead with, and I still can't believe this is a sentence you have to say as an F1 journalist, that went ahead because the drivers and championship were given assurances about the quality of the missile defence system and the security protocols in the area, which is, again, obviously, baffling situation. But how can I say this and still be employed on next Monday is that obviously Saudi Arabia is a very, very wealthy nation, and there's a lot of state backing behind that race, and a lot of high-profile sponsors and a lot of powerful people who have many, many connections within F1. So there was certainly a desire from some very important people that you wouldn't want to sort of say no to. At that point, the race goes ahead, whether that's the right reasoning behind it or not.
Yeah, there is. It's an uncomfortable conversation to have. It's not an easy thing to discuss, and of course, then the flooding this weekend, and it's one that we'd love to hear your thoughts on in the comments below. What do you think about cancelling this weekend and some of the impacts on whether they could perhaps race later in the year, find a gap in the calendar? How do you feel maybe you were due to be there and you just want to vent your thoughts in the comments below? We'd love to hear from you and to hear what's on your mind. Of course, stay tuned to the channel because I'm sure there's going to be some more videos and podcasts to make this week as we get some more news, more reaction to bring you. Thank you very much for watching this one, and we'll catch you on the next one.